Hey there everybody, Pete Pardo here from Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Questions and Answers. Today is Saturday, January, what is today? 25th, 26th? One or the other. I don't know. I've been away traveling for a week and a half basically. So I'm kind of a little lost on the date today. I think it's the 26th, but whatever date, doesn't really matter. We're back after a 2-week delay. Trying to get to your questions over the last 2 weeks, so we'll get to as many as we possibly can today. Thanks for joining. First question is from Niels B. Niels, I hope I'm saying your name right. The Black Crowes, what do you think about them? They were a great band, I think. I always liked the Black Crowes. I remember when the Black Crowes kind of burst on the scene, what was that, like 1990 or something like that? Right around late 80s, early 90s. And kind of a lot of the buzz about them was kind of what you see today with like Rival Sons and Greta Van Fleet. They were like, this new, hot, young kind of Southern bands who were playing like a kind of mix of like the Stones and the Faces, a little bit of that Southern rock style. And, their first couple albums were really, really good. I remember seeing them opening up for ZZ Top in Madison Square Garden back in the day on their first big tour. And I thought they were better, to be honest. And I love ZZ Top, but ZZ Top were in that kind of like real formulaic period where they were doing all the kind of gimmicky moves and things on stage and playing all those kind of 80s hits and whatnot. And, that kind of, to me, was a little bit lacking. And I thought the Black Crowes were really, really good. And I like most of their material. I thought they're, and now they're kind of broken up because the two Robinson brothers just can't get along. Kind of sounds like the Kinks story, doesn't it? And but I like those last couple albums they did before they actually kind of split. So good band, great band. Arguable, really good band, absolutely. I always dug them. From Lisa T, I am trying to get every single Jethro Tull album on CD. All I need left is a PassionPlay.com and the Christmas album. My question is, are they worth getting? I am not sure if they are good or not. Well, first of all, you need to go out and get Passion Play immediately. Passion Play is awesome. If you like Thick as a Brick, you're going to love Passion Play. Same type of format, basically, one gargantuan long tune for the most part, broken up into two sides of vinyl. Concept album. Passion Play is, you should just either go out and get it today if you have a local store that carries Jethro Tull CDs, or go on Amazon or wherever it is you buy your stuff and order it immediately. As far as .com, I'm not a huge fan of .com. It's okay. It's got some good stuff. Probably for me, .com is their second weakest album after Under Wraps, in my opinion. It was kind of like that was their last, kind of hurrah studio album. Before all the upheaval in the band, and now Ian's kind of like just totally taking control and revolving cast of characters. And is it Jethro Tull? Is it just Ian Anderson's Jethro Tull? Is it just Ian Anderson solo? Whatever. But .com was the last pretty much official Jethro Tull album. Although you can call Thick as a Brick 2 might be that as well. But I'm going with the Martin Barr, lineup of the band. Not a terrible album. Not great, I don't think. I very rarely listen to it. As far as the Christmas album, that's fantastic. Another one, just go out and get. Really, really good. That's one of my favorite holiday albums. So definitely get those. So from Super Rowdy 1. There we go, Super Rowdy 1. How about some deep cuts on the amazing Foghat, brother? Brother! How about it? Possibly. Maybe I'll pick one of their albums and do a deep cuts on classic albums. I like Foghat. How about a top 10 songs from Foghat? Would you go for that? That might be fun too. I like Foghat. From Alex L. Zeppelin are a leading band of the early 70s rock, hard rock, classic rock, however we call it. Sabbath, Purple Heap, etc., that type of music. Certainly one of my favorite bands and probably one of the most popular rock bands ever. The thing is, most people I met in my life so far who are seriously into this genre favor Purple over Zeppelin. Many of them favor Sabbath too. You interact with more people. Prove me if I'm wrong, please. I prefer Purple and Sabbath. On the other hand, casual listeners or folks who like other genres, they all like Zeppelin. If they heard of Purple or Sabbath, they certainly did not listen to them. Whose opinion should matter the most to decide who are the leading band of the era? General population or diehard fans of hard rock? I mean, that's really getting down to the weeds. It's all in the eye of the beholder, or the ear of the beholder, right? Who's it for me to tell anybody whether they should like Purple over Sabbath over Zeppelin? It's kind of a moot point. I do kind of agree with you though. I think the more casual rock fan is always going to say Led Zeppelin because they know Stairway to Heaven and Rock and Roll and A Whole Lot of Love and maybe a handful of other tunes because that's what they've heard on the radio a million times since the beginning of time, since they were kids. Whereas Purple, they maybe know Smoke on the Water and one or two other songs. You know, Sabbath, they know probably Iron Man, War Pigs, and Paranoid. You know, but you know, I also don't agree, because I know a lot of people who know a lot about music, and there's some of them who also pick Zeppelin over the other two. So it's just kind of based on what you like, right? And so I don't think there's any right or wrong here. They're arguably three of the greatest hard rock bands of all time. So you really can't go wrong picking any of them. Just because I prefer Purple over Zeppelin, because, you know, for me, stack up the three of them, the three heavyweights, the order and my preference is Purple, Sabbath, Zeppelin. But there's no right or wrong here. It's all dependent on what you like. So to each his own. From Moonspell67, as always, good video. Thank you, sir. I really dig the Q&A. Let's play a game of Would You Rather. I'm game. Would you rather make part of a future video a who's who of lesser-known musicians, or would you rather spend an afternoon sweating to the oldies with nude Richard Simmons bands? Well, I have no interest in spending any amount of time with Richard Simmons, i.e. Gaskin, Wildheart, Zodio Mind Warp, Accuser, Anathema, or Kings of the Sun. I'm not really sure what your question is here, my friend. Would I rather talk about older and newer bands? I enjoy both. I don't know. You know, you can talk about the older bands because you know more about them. Is it cool to talk about some of the newer bands too, especially the people who don't know a lot about them? Sure. So I could go either way. I don't really have a preference. As far as some of these bands, you know, I like Anathema. Not really that familiar with some of the other ones. I've heard a little Kings of the Sun, Zodiac Mind Warp, of course, I heard a little bit about. Gaskin, I've never heard. Accuser? Why does that name sound familiar? Anyway, you can't listen to everything, can't know everything. But interesting question. From Earl Joy. Hi, Pete. I really enjoy your posts. Thank you, Earl. What is your opinion of Atomic Rooster? My favorite record they put out is In Hearing Of. Well, I've actually talked about Atomic Rooster a lot in the show. I'm a big fan. I really love their first three. You've mentioned their third one. The self-titled is fantastic. It's got Carl Palmer on drums. For any of you who have not listened to Atomic Rooster, I highly recommend you check out their self-titled debut. Carl Palmer, fresh out of the Arthur Brown, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and just prior to him joining Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And their second album is, without a doubt, their epic and best, Death Walks Behind You, one of the unsung heavy rock, heavy prog, however the hell you want to classify it, albums of the very early 70s. In Hearing Of is their third album. I like that a lot too. Not quite as much as the first, the second, the two before it. And then the couple that came after, pretty decent, but definitely changed their style a bit. Went a lot more kind of bluesy, but still pretty solid. But man, those first three albums, top notch. From Tim Marciniak. Hey, Pete, if you haven't, can you do a review of the Paradigms album by Semantic Saturation? Tim, I haven't heard that one yet. The only album I'm familiar by Semantic Saturation is their, that album that came out a few years ago. Was it Solipsistic? However the hell you say that. That was pretty damn good. Kind of like a supergroup. A lot of really cool members in that band. So, but no, I have not heard Paradigms. I think that came out last year, right? But did not get sent a review copy, and I have not, seeked it out. From Barry Strong. Hi, Pete. Love these Q&A sessions, and I always learn so much more. That's what it's all about, right? Anyway, my question is regarding AC/DC. In my opinion, Mutt Lange ruined this band when he produced Highway to Hell, which was glossy and too commercial for my ears. The band's Let There Be Rock album and Riff Raff, Sin City, and Kicked in the Teeth from Power Age album is really great. AC/DC at their rockin' best. I accept there are a couple of great tracks from Back in Black and the follow-up album, but since then the albums are so formulaic. Your thoughts, please. I mean, you could arguably say that AC/DC's entire career was pretty formulaic, right? It really was, but that's been the beauty of what AC/DC does. You know, as far as Mutt Lange goes, I liked what he did with AC/DC much more than I like, what he did with Def Leppard. I think he got a little too, and maybe it was a sign of the times, because you're talking about, mid-'80s here by this time, and I think those two really enormous Def Leppard albums were just really overproduced. Pyromania, borderline, but a great album, great songs, and obviously the album that came before it, really, really good, and that was probably as close to Highway to Hell as far as sound as you're going to get from Def Leppard. But I like Highway to Hell. I think it's a great album, and I think at that point, you got to think about it in these terms. At that point in time, AC/DC needed a kind of more commercial sound to really break through the masses. And I think that Mutt Lange gave them that sound. Songs were still great. The songs still kicked ass. But he made them sound larger than life. And I think that's what they needed. That early stuff, as great as it is, and it is, might have been a little too raw for the general masses, even though a lot of people kind of have fallen back on those albums and, really come to love them, obviously, over the years. But I think, Highway to Hell and For Those About to Rock, and specifically Back in Black, huge sounding albums that, really catapulted AC/DC to superstardom, and they never looked back. Personally, I like all the albums they've done after that. I honestly don't think AC/DC have ever released a crappy album. Some of them, a little more, kind of generic sounding than others. But, there's great tunes on every AC/DC album. And I've always said, AC/DC and Motorhead kind of been making the same album over and over and over again throughout their whole career. But there's nothing wrong with that because all the albums are good. So, it depends on your opinion on that. But that's kind of how I feel. From Dan Thompson, I haven't seen you talk much about Alice Cooper. Is he not something that you like? I love Alice Cooper. I'm pretty sure I've talked quite a bit about Alice Cooper. Huge fan of Alice Cooper's, the Alice Cooper Band and Alice's solo stuff in the 70s. Early 80s stuff I'm kind of hit or miss on. It's good. It's kind of weird, kind of punky, new wave-ish. I like the late 80s, mid and late 80s stuff where he got more into kind of like the hair metal stuff. And the 90s and all the more recent stuff is really good. I love Alice Cooper. I'm a fan of pretty much almost every era of the band. And he's just such a cool guy. And at 70-something years old, man, I just saw him live a couple years ago. Man, he still puts on a great performance. So, love Alice. From Tate Davis. Hey, Pete, thanks so much for answering my questions. I have a few for you this week. What are your top 5 Andy Parker drum tracks from his time in UFO? Man, I'm getting a lot of these favorite drum tracks questions lately. Guys, I'm not a drummer. I'm not hugely interested in drum stuff. Someone asked a Keith Moon one a couple weeks ago, and that was pretty easy to answer. But this is a little difficult, but I'll throw you some ones that I think Andy Parker really stands out. Pack It Up and Go off of Obsession, I think, is dynamite, and I think he kicks ass on that. This Kid's, another great performance from him. Lights Out, obviously. He's rampaging on that right alongside Schenker. Shoot Shoot, I think he does an admirable job on. And, of course, Rock Bottom. So there's some tunes for you right there. Question number 2 from Tate. What is your favorite song on War Horse's debut album? That's a great album. Both those 2 War Horse albums are kick-ass. So, if you have never heard War Horse, this is obviously Nick Simper's band after he left, was kicked out of Deep Purple. Those 2 War Horse albums are so much like Deep Purple Mark II albums. It's like the unreleased Deep Purple Mark II albums, basically. That's how similar they sound to that classic Deep Purple sound. But to get back to your question, I really like that track Burning off that first album, although, man, every song on that album is really, really good. So that's everybody's homework for today. If you have not listened to War Horse, go onto YouTube and check out some of their stuff. Great, great band. Question number 3 from Tate. What album would you recommend to someone wanting to get into the band Angel? My first is a debut. That's a great album. And what I like about the first album is it really mixes like that kind of late 70s hard rock with some serious prog rock. Also, their second album, Hell of a Band, is very good too. Really good. Very close second there. So if you're new to Angel, I would start with the first and get the second, but you can't go wrong with either one. The ones that came after are a little more commercial sounding, but still very, very solid. But those first 2, man, top notch. From Aaron Magram. Hey, Pete, I heard you mention the band Birth Control in a Q&A. Love the band name, so I had to check them out. I listened to Hoodoo Man, which was cool, and then Plastic People. Ha! Is this the same band? This one knocked me out. Don't get me wrong, I love the Deep Purple vibe of the earlier album, but they really stepped up the melody, writing, and arranging for this album. Very much out my alley. So for those of you who don't know, the Plastic People is Birth Control's, who are a German band, full-on prog album. It's great. If you're familiar with the history of this band, what other albums do you suggest I check out? Thanks so much. Great question, Aaron. So I love Birth Control. Great band. Their 70s stuff is just awesome. The great thing about Birth Control is they kind of, I wouldn't say completely changed up their sound for every album, but every album sounds completely different for the most part. So if you really like the Plastic People stuff, I suggest you check out Backdoor Possibilities and Increase. Those are probably the three most proggy albums. If you like the earlier sound, that kind of like heavy Hammond organ guitar, like Deep Purple Heat type of stuff, that bluesy hard rock with the Hammond, check out, also check out Titanic. That was also another one of their later 70 albums that also is pretty proggy. Check out Rebirth, Operation. Those are two of their earlier albums that sound very similar to Hoodoo Man, that, you know, heavy Hammond organ, crunchy guitar, blistering lead guitar solos. But also check out, they have two live albums from the 70s. One came out in 74, one came out in 79, both great, and both kind of representing like the early era and then the later 70s era. Great stuff, great band. From Bongalon. Have you heard of the 70s band Tranquility and their album Silver? Not available on CD. The master tapes are unusable, but can be found on the mighty YouTube. Amazing vocals with great playing. You know what? I had never heard of the band before, Bongalong, so I went onto YouTube and I listened to the whole Silver album. Damn good. And it is available on CD. I have it on order. Kind of what I thought when I was listening to the album. You know, they've got these great kind of like Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young vocal harmonies. Little bits of acoustic guitar stuff going on, but then you got the cool keyboards and some really ripping guitar work and all these different vocal harmonies, which I like. To me, it reminded me, and it's not very heavy. There's a couple of rocking spots on there, but it's more of kind of like mid-paced rock type stuff. Little prog, you know, a little kind of folky stuff. I kind of heard a little Starcastle, a little Supertramp, and the aforementioned Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. I liked it, and I definitely wanted to get it, so I put it on order. From Evo Zanetti. Hi, Pete. Lately I've been rediscovering the Motor City Madman. So much great classic rock. Any thoughts on the Nuge? Yeah, I mean, I love the old Nugent stuff. Actually, you know, Nugent's career has been pretty solid for the most part. His like first three or four, well, actually all those 70s albums are damn good. Damn good. And I think that he is a fantastic guitar player. I wish, personally, that he would have stuck with Derek St. Holmes for a little bit longer. I really thought those two guys were magic together. Because let's face it, Nuge is not the greatest singer in the world. He's got a distinct style, and it goes with his style of music. But there's something about when he had Derek St. Holmes singing and playing rhythm guitar next to him while he just went berserk with just crunchy riffs and sizzling solos. That was just magic, and I wish that they would have kept that together a little longer. But there's no denying that all those 70s albums are just top-notch great. Really, really good. So I should probably do a Ted Nugent top 10 songs, right? Because he's got a lot of great ones. Thanks, Evo. From Brian Harris. Hi, Pete. Thanks for considering my questions. In your opinion, what makes an artist great? Their recorded work or their live work? Or a combination of both? And as a follow-up, are there any artists you consider great in the studio but their live work doesn't quite live up to it? Or any bands whose live work is better than their studio output? Jesus. I mean, there's been a lot of bands whose live work was better than their studio albums, although the studio albums were quite solid. You know, and we just talked about Nugent. He was one of them. I think some of his live stuff just came across even more massive, or studio stuff came across better live. Same thing could be said for Kiss. You know, some bands just were better. You know, Government Mule is another perfect example of a more recent band whose live albums are fantastic, but man, they take that to another level on stage. Thin Lizzy maybe too. You know, arguably you could say a lot of those 70s hard rock bands, they're as great as their albums were. Man, you got them live and poof, to another level. But like a band that I think whose studio output pales in comparison to their live were probably the Grateful Dead. I own almost all in fact, I think I own all the Grateful Dead studio albums. And there's some damn good ones. But I think for the most part, they were just better on stage. And then you got a band like Steely Dan, who, you know, not a regular touring band throughout their career, but their albums are just absolutely dynamite, sonic perfection. And then, I only saw them once, so I guess I probably shouldn't even include them here. But seeing them live a few years ago, I thought they were very good, but it was not quite the same. It just sometimes you got that the studio stuff is just so perfect, and then you see them live on stage, and it's like, yeah, this is great, this is cool, but man, those albums just sound so much better. So that's a great question, and that probably deserves a lot more research and time spent. So I may use that as a basis for a full-on show at some point, because that's a great one. That's something I'd really like to do a lot of research on. From Dan Thompson. Hi, Pete. I'm just wondering how big your music collection is. I get this question every week. Guys, you got to stop asking this question, okay? I've got 8,000 plus CDs. I got rid of most of my vinyl back in the late 80s, so I only have like maybe 15 or 20 LPs. I don't have any cassettes anymore, so I got a ton of music. But anyway, I know you're asking more here. Like me, you look like you are an album guy, not too many singles. No, I never collected singles other than when I was like a little kid. Your tastes align pretty well with mine, at least in the hard rock genre. I'm not really into prog or jazz fusion. Unlike you, however, my collection is completely digital for various reasons. I am constantly buying new stuff, but as of today, I have about 12,000 albums and just over 137,000 songs. I'm interested in the size of your collection as well as some of your followers out there. Yeah, I just not into the digital thing. I'm an old dinosaur. I'm still into the physical product. I have never purchased or an album just to have on the download. I got to get a CD. I got to have something physical. It's just me. And at 53 years old, I can't see myself changing that. Will it come a time where there are no more physical anything, and you have no choice? Well, we'll see how it goes then. But for right now, as long as CDs are available, I'm going to keep buying them. Second part of the question. I grew up in the 80s and have always been a record collector, but I'm amazed by how much new music I discovered from the 70s, 80s that I was not even aware of back then, particularly in the hard rock genre. Anyway, thanks for the videos. Keep them coming. Yeah, I mean, that's a great statement there. I think one of the great things about this show, and of course here comes the phone, is it's my mother calling. Anyway, let's let the phone go. This is a live show here, so I just, gotta let it go. One of the great things about doing a show like this is not only do I get to talk about a lot of bands and like underground and obscure stuff that maybe you're not familiar with. I mean, every week I get people who telling me about bands that I've never heard of before that I go investigate that I'm like, oh, that's great.
Calling to say hi, see how everything is. You're probably at the gym working out.
I'm not actually.
But we're home. Jersey had too much going on, so we are not going there.
I'm so happy to share this with you guys, by the way.
Your day goes well. Call me when you get a chance. Bye now. Love you.
Mom is awesome, by the way. Just so you know, my mother is awesome. What was I saying? God, I got thrown off here. Yeah, so no, there's so much stuff out there. You can't even grasp the enormity of how much great underground music there is, especially from the 70s and 80s and even the 60s. I mean, every week I'm finding stuff that I never heard about. Just when you think that you've, been subjected to all the music there is, you haven't even scratched the surface. So yeah, great comment, Dan. From Zachary Newman. Pete, do you enjoy Terry Reid stuff? I found Seed of Memory, and it's a solid album from top to bottom. Love your music knowledge and expertise. Thanks. Yeah, I think I have a couple Terry Reids. I have the Bang Bang, Your Terry Reid album, which is very good. Seed of Memory is also great. And his self-titled album is very good. Really good vocalist. I wish some of his stuff was a little bit more, I don't know. He kind of flirts with, rocking out a bit, and then, but man, the guy's voice is so damn good. He should have been enormous, I think. Another part of Zachary's question. Also check out Chon, C-H-O-N. Fluffy is a hell of a good prog metal tune by them. Cheers, dude. Yeah, I listened to that song. I never heard them before. Really cool, like instrumental, jazzy prog metal. Great chops. Good stuff. From Chris Samardzic. Hi, Chris from Brotherhood of Light Show. Hey, Pete, thanks for doing a rant on one of my suggestions in May. You're very welcome. Sharing some knowledge about Come Taste the Band. Back in '75, Ritchie Blackmore came out with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Deep Purple in October came out with Come Taste the Band in November. Tommy Bolin came out with the album Teaser. I think it was a mistake to call Come Taste the Band a Deep Purple band. Well, I mean, it's kind of late for that, but I totally hear what you're saying. Great album, though. There was large conflict with Tommy's Teaser and Come Taste the Band as far as radio play. The DJs would rather play Teaser than Come Taste the Band, which really hurt album sales. Question for you. Of the three albums, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow debut, Come Taste the Band, and Teaser, what are your favorite of the three in order? God. In recent years, and I've said this before, a lot of people ask about Come Taste the Band last couple weeks. I really have grown to love that album. And that's an album that I kind of liked, but, didn't really get too into way back in the day. But I'm going to say, even though Rainbow's second album, Rising, obviously is way better than the debut, I'm going to give Rainbow's first album a little edge here. and then I'm going to go Come Taste the Band, and then Teaser. And that's not to knock Teaser, because I think Teaser is a really, really good album. As far as all of them coming out at the same time, yeah, that must have been a lot confusing for people, because again, we're talking back in a time where there was no internet, right? So a lot of people probably were still confused. There were probably people who hadn't heard, if you weren't reading magazines or newspapers, how would you even know that Blackmore was out of Purple, right? If you weren't reading Hit Parader and Circus and all that kind of stuff, and it's not like they were publishing those, every day. They were on like a bi-weekly or monthly, whatever the hell they were. So Blackmore could have left a couple months ago, and you wouldn't have heard about it for another month or two. And if you didn't read the stuff, you might not have even known. So just imagine going out and buying like Come Taste the Band. Like, where's Richie? Who's this guy? Right? So, but Tommy's album, Teaser's got some really good like commercial stuff on it. I think very accessible, but all three great albums. So I'm going to go Rainbow, Purple, and Bolin on that. But again, not to knock any of the three, because they're all really, really great. From our buddy Scalagrimmer Kvaltsifin. Sorry, man. Hi, Pete. Thanks again for answering all those questions last week. I learned new things every time. Cool. I wonder, have you ever heard of the Italian band Sensations Fix? They played a unique kind of psychedelic rock. Their guitarist Franco Falsini also released a solo masterpiece called Cold Nose. Very mesmerizing and dreamlike. I had not heard of them, but I went on to, obviously, YouTube here, and I listened to a whole bunch of songs. I kind of liked it. Kind of like spacey prog, I guess you could call it space rock. His guitar style is interesting. On the band stuff, on the Sensations Fix stuff, he's got like this kind of real cool, like hard rock, bluesy hard rock style. A lot of cool like solos and things like that with all the synths going around. But his solo stuff is a little more mellow. I thought that was total like space rock, very atmospheric, lots of synths and effects and things like that. So good stuff. Thanks for suggesting that. From Melora Loves Darkness. Melora, how are you? 2 more questions for you. Death metal band from Sweden. My favorite is Hypocrisy. Great band. They started as a 5-piece and became a power trio, beginning with The Fourth Dimension, which I think is a wonderful death thrash metal album. They just became a great death metal band after becoming a trio. Your thoughts? I always really liked Hypocrisy. I had the opportunity to hang out with Peter Todgren. Jesus, I'm trying to remember. I think it was on the Virus tour. That was one of their albums. And he's really, really nice guy. And a great band. I actually hung out with him and Horg, the drummer. And I like them. I think they're good. I like some of their more technical stuff. Like the Virus album is great. I like Into the Abyss a lot. Final Chapter's good. Taste of Extreme Divinity is one of the later ones. All really good albums. You can't go wrong with any Hypocrisy album. Just a great musician, writer, producer. Peter's just a really, really cool guy. Well, Laura's second question. Also, I think that a Megadeth thing is due as well. I'm assuming you mean a Megadeth show. Pete, maybe please. I think that Peace Sells is one of the greatest albums of all time, with Rust in Peace being the second best Megadeth album. Wake Up Dead and The Conjuring are my top 2 thrash songs to kill for. Yeah, I'm a huge Peace Sells But Who's Buying album, or Peace Sells in general. And I think The Conjuring is just a great tune. Wake Up Dead was actually one of my anthems of the 80s, because I was big into thrash at the time. And I think both those albums are fantastic. And actually another listener, or another viewer I should say, has also asked if we can do like a Megadeth top 10 song show. So I think we're going to have to do that at some point. From Emilio Valdez, just heard the passing of drummer Ted McKenna. Yeah. Have you ever heard him on the Tear Gas albums with Zal Clemenson and Chris Glenn? Yeah, that I have the self-titled one from 1971. Very good album. Yeah, that a big loss. I mean, Ted was just a great drummer, and it sucks because I actually have tickets to go see the Michael Schenker Fest in a couple months, and he was obviously supposed to be part of it. Now he's not. So, yeah. Makes you wonder who they're going to get on drums. Maybe they'll ask Herman Z. German. We'll see. From Gear Lad and Lad. Another one for you, Pete. Have you ever heard of a band called Evidence One? They have an album called Criticize the Truth that has some good songs on it. I had never listened to them before, but I went and checked them out. Good kind of like power/prog metal, but a lot of AOR influence, really good melodic rock. I love the guitar tones, a lot of keyboards. Good band, very solid. I liked it. From Jim Collins, Pete, love your shows. I'll sit down with the intention of watching one, then 2 or 3 hours later I've watched several and haven't gotten a damn thing done I'd intended to do. Welcome to YouTube, my friend. It's evil. A few questions, please. I haven't heard you mention the criminally overlooked Riot and wondered what you thought of them. While they're still a great band, those first 5 albums are killer records. Thoughts on them? Yeah, I mean, all those early albums are really good. And for me, I think Fire Down Under is one of the unsung metal albums of the, God, was that early 80s? What year did that come out? 80, 81? Something like that. Yeah, all those for, Born in America is great. Rock City, it's all good stuff. All good stuff. Really, really good band that, God, just never had any luck going for them, right? Next question from Jim. I'm a huge Megadeth fan. I was wondering if maybe you do a top 10 songs or even a catalog overview. Yep, as we just said, I'm going to probably do that. Are you familiar with French axe wizard Patrick Rondat? He's a phenomenal player, and his Amphibia album is a superb instrumental showcase, particularly the epic title suite, not to mention the thundering drum work of Tommy Aldridge. Yeah, good solid album. A lot of tasty melodies. He's got chops of doom, helps having Tommy alongside. Really, really good player. There's so many of these great young shredder guys out there right now from all over the world, From David M. Thanks for answering all my questions. I have 3 for you today. I have the first 3 Santana releases along with his last 2. What would you recommend if one was going to purchase aside from the 5 mentioned? Well, so you got the first 3. So I would start from there. Caravanserai from 72 is phenomenal. Great jazz fusion album. It's pretty much all instrumental. Awesome album. Borboleto from 74 is great. Amigos from 76. Also, you check out the Welcome album from 73. I highly recommend their live album, Lotus. Oh, yeah, it's probably my favorite of their live albums. It's really good. A lot of jamming. It's very kind of trippy and it's really cool. I also like, if you want to go a little later, check out Z-Bop from 81. It's more of a commercial album, but there's some really great songs on it. Really good songs. So that's where I would go next. If you like all that stuff, there's so much Santana to check out. Ask me again in a month, and I'll give you some more recommendations, but where to go next. But you really can't go wrong with most of the Santana albums. All right, David, second question. I have Hawkwind's Warrior on the Edge of Time, which is fantastic. Yeah, it is. What other Hawkwind releases would you recommend? All right, just like Santana, a million albums. Where I would go next. Definitely get Space Ritual. That's their live album from 73. That's really good. As far as studio albums go, I would make your next purchase Hall of the Mountain Grill from 74. That's probably my favorite. My favorite 2 are Warrior on the Edge of Time and Hall of the Mountain Grill. Great albums. Go into the 80s and get Chronicle of the Black Sword, which is a fantastic album. Little different, okay, more kind of hard rock album, but with like some great spacey keys. The space rock thing is still there, but it's a little more epic sounding, a little more 80s style. In Search of Space from 71 is great if you want to go for the really early stuff, as well as Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do from 72. Levitation from 1980 is another great kind of metallic space rock album. So many of them. So many of them. We can go on and on and on. The Cork album is great. But start there. That's a good, because there's so many Hawkwind albums. So I would start with those. And number 3, with Dream Theater getting to release their latest, what are your thoughts on the post-Mike Portnoy Dream Theater? When I look to listen to Dream Theater, I tend to pull a Mike Portnoy era release over the post-Mike Portnoy era. In other words, the Mike Mangini era. Well, I will tell you this. Those first 2 albums with Mangini, Dramatic Turn of Events and the self-titled album, I actually like better than the last 2 with Portnoy. Okay? I think the last couple they did with Portnoy were starting to get away from the classic Dream Theater sound, and he was having a lot of influence on that. I'm not saying it's bad, but I don't like the songwriting as much on those last 2 with Portnoy, whereas I think Dramatic Turn of Events and the Dream Theater album are really, really, really solid albums. I like them a lot. But I totally get you. If you're going to reach for Dream Theater, we tend to go towards the earlier stuff, and, there's no denying, Scenes from a Memory, and obviously Images and Words, and Train of Thought, and Octavarian. It's great albums. All those albums are great. I find, though, I'm really looking forward to the new album, because that last album, The Astonishing, not a fan. I really wanted to love that, and I just cannot get into it. I saw them live doing that whole album start to finish, and it just bored the shit out of me. So I'm really hoping I dig the new album. From Gregory Krug, I still can't believe that Pete isn't into Radiohead. You can't like and listen to everything, my friend. Maybe someday I will get into them and just investigate them more. I can't say I dislike anything I've heard from them. Just nothing has really kind of jumped out at me. But maybe I just need to dive in, and I probably will, because I'm good that way. From Lonnie VR. Okay, Pete, let's try this for fun. There's an all-day fantasy concert featuring all mid-level bands. All the bands are in their classic lineups. I'm going to list the bands, and your job is to schedule them for the concert from opening band to the headliner. Enjoy. Oh boy. Thin Lizzy, Nazareth, UFO, Foghat, Angel, Montrose. Man. All right. So I'm going to say that opening the show will be Foghat, followed by Angel, followed by Nazareth, followed by UFO, followed by Montrose, headlined by Thin Lizzy. That's what I would do. Okay? But, you ask me next week, I might give you a different answer. But it's a great question. From Julian Godley. Good to see Person getting a mention there, Pete. You're welcome. That band really should have been much bigger than they were. Things were looking up for them when they were supported Ghost over on your side of the pond, but unfortunately Rosie called it a day not long afterwards. The good news is that a new solo album is imminent. Cool. Okay, knowing your love of Black Sabbath and early Chicago, I'd love to know what you make of the band Brown Sabbath. A bit of novelty act, but some great versions of Sabbath tunes arranged for a lineup that features a horn section and percussion. Yeah, it's fun stuff, isn't it? Really, really cool. I listened to a bunch of their remakes of Black Sabbath classics, and it's just so different and so fun, so really, really cool stuff. From NP, hey again, Pete, glad you like some of the game music. I figured you would like the Ian Gillan one. I have another question about instrumental music. How familiar are you with the KPN library from the UK? They did a lot of stock music for TV shows and commercials in the 60s and 70s in the UK, and for other shows too, most notably the 60s Spider-Man cartoon. I believe they're still going, or at least are relicensing old music because there is a demand for it. Are you a fan? I've never investigated. I mean, I know the Spider-Man cartoon theme song, which I adore. I don't know what else they've done, but I might have to investigate that. But no, I'm not really familiar. From Wizardo Fox. Hi, Pete. Thanks for answering. I don't know if you ever mentioned the band Crack the Sky. They have been around since 1975, I think. If you had, sorry. I would like to know your opinion about them. Their last album, Crackology, is an amazing blend of prog, hard, pop, and virtuosity, in my opinion. You know what? I've never investigated Crack the Sky. This is probably like the third time we've been asked this question, and like I said, you can't listen to everything, right? And I know these guys have been around forever and they got a million albums, but I have never really listened to Crack the Sky, other than maybe a song or two here and there. But maybe I should check them out because I've got enough recommendations, right? From Stuart Fagley. Hi, Pete. Like everyone else, I love the Q&A videos. Curious to hear your thoughts about the Australian hard rock band The Angels, or known in the U.S. as Angel City. Put out some great records over the years. 2 Minute Warning is very strong, as is their live album, Live Line. Their singer, Doc Neeson, was a one-of-a-kind talent. So I went and listened to bits of both the albums you recommended there. Didn't really do it for me. I found their music a little one-dimensional. And honestly, I'm not crazy about his vocals. Again, you can't like everything, right? But thanks for the question. From Anconia's Place. I'm a huge BOC fan, and I'm really curious about the other bands that showed up on the Bad Channel soundtrack that BOC did back in 1992. Bands like Joker, DMT, Fair Game, and Psychotic Symphony. Unfortunately, I can't find much of any info on them. Wonder what became of any or all of them, and whether it's worth putting out the big bucks that it takes to buy their albums on Discogs or eBay. Thoughts? I've never heard of any of them. I could not tell you. From Bree, hey Pete, I've been looking to get into Kansas discography, so I was wondering if you could rank their albums. So in other words, the best or worst albums? Probably can do that. From Steve Syme, thanks again for the Q&A, Pete. Are you familiar with Aikida, Third World, the 1973 largely instrumental album Steve Winwood did with two Afro-Cuban artists? I had not heard that before. I went and listened to it. I liked it. Pretty cool. Kind of like world music meets some funk and some jazz. Pretty mellow. I like, every now and then you hear Winwood come out and play a cool guitar solo. Pretty neat stuff. From Tom Fisher. Pete, thanks for another great Q&A. Have you ever listened to or own anything from the English progressive folk band The Pentangle? And your opinion. Second, are you a fan of Traffic? Always considered Steve Winwood to be one of my favorite vocalists. Like how he is able to trade guitar solos with Clapton on Blind Faith and when I saw them live in 2008. Okay, so first part of the question, Pentangle. I have tried to get into some of that kind of British folky stuff like, Fairport Convention and Pentangle and Steel Eye Span. I'm not a huge folk guy. For me, it's just, I need electric instruments. And I know they incorporated some here and there, but I've tried to get into that real folky stuff. It's just not really my thing. Good for what it is, though. Like I can pop on a Pentangular Steel Eye Span or Fairport album, you know, and listen to it on YouTube or something like that and say, oh, it's not too bad, but not enough to go own it, buy it, and really dig into it on my own. As far as Traffic, yeah, I love Traffic. Great band. I love how they incorporated so many different styles, and I think Winwood is an absolute musical genius. Great vocalist. He plays a mean Hammond organ. Great guitar player. Top-notch stuff. Top-notch musician, I should say. From James Farrar. Hey, I'm new to your show, so I don't know if you have covered this, but I haven't heard you mention and would like your thoughts on Suicidal Tendencies / Infectious Grooves, Helmet, SOD, MOD, and I would think there's a prog band, Quicksand. The Slip album is awesome. Thank you for your time. I'm not a huge Suicidal Tendencies fan or Infectious Grooves. I don't know. That stuff is just not really for me. Helmet I've never really listened to. Now, in saying that, I loved SOD and MOD when they first came out in the mid-late 80s. I thought that stuff was really, really cool. It was fun. Kind of like a novelty thing at the time. But other than that, I really have not listened to that stuff in a long, long time, 25, 30 years. And Quicksand I've never listened to either. From Robert Adam Mind X, I think heavy neo-progressive rock bands like Unitopia, Southern Empire, United Progressive Fraternity, and the Samurai of Prague and Nad Sylvan are seriously criminally overlooked and criminally underrated bands. What is your take on these bands? Do you have any of their libraries in your collection? I do have a couple of Unitopia albums. They're a really good band. I don't think I've ever heard anything from Southern Empire or United Progressive Fraternity. I have heard some Samurai of Prague. They're very solid. And Nad Sylvan is a great singer. Man, anybody who sounds like Peter Gabriel, I automatically really like a lot. And I've liked his last couple of solo albums. But I think within the prog community, I think most of those bands are pretty respected and well known. From our buddy Jiff882, speaking of Eloy, how do you rate Power and the Passion? I don't see a lot of great reviews for that one. I like that album. All those early Eloys are very good, and I think that the Power and the Passion was a great bridge to like what they would start doing on albums like Silent Cries and Mighty Echoes and Ocean and the Dawn album. It was just like a natural kind of progression from that early kind of hard rock sound they had with the heavy Hammond organ in the beginning to more of that kind of like proggy space rock type of thing. So I like Power and the Passion. It's kind of it's a little bit of a bizarre album because there's a lot of like kind of spoken word stuff and shorter tracks and things like that, but pretty damn good. I like it. From AZDH85224, love the question and answer shows. Pete, great. Recently started listening to John Scofield. His new CD Combo 6.6 is excellent, but his collaboration with Government Mule, Sko Mule is fantastic. As a 40-plus year guitar player, this album has actually made me want to learn some new guitar licks. Check them out. Yeah, I have not heard his new one, but the Sko Mule album is great. It's really good. Hearing him and Warren kind of trading solos and stuff is just absolutely a joy to listen to. I'm a big Warren Haynes fan. And Scofield is great. If you get a chance, go listen to some of that stuff that Scofield did with Miles Davis. There's an album he did. It was Miles and Mike Stern. Scofield and Mike Stern playing with Miles. God, I forget the name of the album. God, it's a great one, though. I have it. It's fantastic. It's on the tip of my tongue right now. From Matty Boy Walker. Hey, Pete, when you did your favorite live albums list a while back, I noticed you didn't include Right Here, Right Now, live by Van Halen, released in 92, when Hagar was still in the band. Do you have and like that album? Do you have and like that album and like it? Do you have and like that album and like it? I never bought that album. You know, by that time, I'd kind of lost interest in what Van Halen were doing, so I never bothered to get it. I know a lot of people like it. And which lineup of the band do you prefer, David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar? You know, back in the day when Sammy first joined the band, I was really into the Sammy version of the band because I always liked Sammy. I liked the solo stuff, and I loved the first Montrose album. And I always thought that David Lee Roth was kind of a jerk, but you can't deny those early Van Halen albums. They're just great. Now, kind of looking back on things, I almost never listened to the Sammy era of the band, and I listen more to the early stuff. So while I think Sammy's a better singer and a cooler guy, you know, the classic Van Halen stuff is the David Lee Roth stuff. So that's my pick right there. From Mark Williams. Hello, Pete. Great show as always. Don't know if I've heard the Tubes mentioned here. One of my favorite bands, very underrated in my opinion. Always thought Fee Waybill was a great frontman. Also have a couple of solo albums from him. What's your take? I like the Tubes. Great band, fun band. I love their What Do You Want From Live album. That live album is just fantastic. It's got a lot of those great early tunes on there. But, you know, Completion Backward Principle, Outside Inside, Love Bomb. Great band. Really, really good band. Underrated band, in my opinion. From Jamie Laszlo. I'm sitting here drinking beers in the middle of the day with a snowstorm outside. So my question is, what do you consider the best drinking albums? And as a part 2, what's the best albums to play on snowy days? I think Opeth is great to play during snowstorms. Jesus. The best drinking albums. Well, when I was a kid, man, and that's what I did was I would go out drinking and listen to tunes. You generally would find me listening to Sabbath, Purple, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions, Rainbow, Whitesnake. That's just, what got me fired up. As far as today, I generally don't just listen to tunes to drink to anymore. But any of those, right? Any of those classic albums by those bands you could put on and be like, "Urgh." So I don't know. Good question, tough question. Metallica was another one. I loved listening to Metallica back in the day, drinking beer. As far as on a snowy day, I don't know. Yeah, I guess Opeth could be. I don't know. I tend to, when it's like snowy or rainy, I tend to go to like old classic prog like Genesis or, Camel or Gentle Giant or Yes or something like that. So, but good question. From Anthony Ferraro. A lot of people have love for Bent Knee. I don't get them. You? I have never listened to Bent Knee. I probably should, right? It's a name I've heard quite a bit. I'm going to have to go check that out. From Bruce Franklin. Hey, Pete, last time someone asked you about Black Oak, Arkansas, and you pretty much only knew the live album, which is awesome. First self-titled album is great, and High on the Hog is really good also. Yeah, I've heard High on the Hog is great. Also, are you into Argent? I own their albums and think at least 3 of them are pretty great. I have Ring of Hands, I have Nexus, and In Deep. I like them. Good kind of proggy hard rock albums with some great Hammond organ. So I've always wanted to experiment more into the... or investigate more of the Argent discography, but just haven't gotten around to it. From James Ferrante, are you a fan of the Rhino collection of instrumental classics from the 50s, 70s, plus soul and surf? There's also a great collection of British 60s instrumental classics called Highly Strung on the Sequel label. My favorite from Rhino is the 70s CD that includes Joy by Apollo 11. James, I have not listened to any of that stuff. I tend to not go listen to a lot of various artists' kind of collections just because there's just so much that I already have to listen to. So, I've not heard any of those. From Bob Goodwin. As always, a great show. Thanks for all the info. I was wondering about your opinion on the band The Strawbs. I got turned on to them back in the late 70s, and I kind of lost track of them. Loved their prog period, but from the the prog period is great, right? So, for me, check out their most recent one. And I can't think of the name. They released one about a year and a half ago, which is really, really good. But for me, I love, from the Witchwood era, Hero and Heroine, Grave New World, Bursting at the Seams, and Ghosts. That's the classic Strawbs period stuff. Where they started incorporating some proggy keyboards and things like that. So, really good band. You got a Dave Cousins vocalist. They're not for everybody, but I think they were one of the bands that perfectly combined like folk and prog. Really did it well. And they had, like I said, they had that string of albums that are just really, really strong. From Wade Harton. Your thoughts on the one and only album by Saint Paradise? It's good, isn't it? Pretty damn solid. In fact, I've never actually picked that up, but you can get it on CD now. You can't go wrong with Derek St. Holmes. Just such a great singer, and he's basically doing most of it. If I remember correctly, most of the lead guitar work on that album. And it's a pretty good, catchy album, catchy hard rock album. Again, one of those one album wonders, right? From Dean Ives, can you give me your top 10 rock films plus live concert DVDs? Okay. Almost Famous. And again, I don't know if I have exactly 10 here. Spinal Tap. The recent Bohemian Rhapsody. Good stuff. The Monterey Pop film is great. The Woodstock film, I absolutely love. Gimme Shelter, another great one. On the more fun side, School of Rock, I think is a fun movie. The Song Remains the Same. Classic. Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny, another fun, kind of music movie. Tommy, okay. Frank Zappa's 200 Motels, as well as the Roxy movie, both of those. Yes Songs, Alice Cooper, the Nightmare movie. One of my favorites, The Kids Were Alright by The Who. Deep Purple, the California Jam concert. Some more recent stuff, live concert DVDs. Neil Morse Band, Similitude of a Dream Live is fantastic. Opeth's Garden of the Titans is great, as well as the Opeth, I forget, Live at the Royal Albert Hall is fantastic too. The Arion Universe that came out recently, Bestivarion, that's great too. So many great ones. So many great ones. We could sit here all day and talk about live concert DVDs. From Eric Ornella, how do you feel about the genre of jam bands? Are there a few that you can name that may be less well known but are worth checking out? You know, there's just only so much time in the day, and there's just so many jam bands out there. I can tell you the ones that I've listened to that I kind of like. Aquarium Rescue Unit, and these are not unknown by any means. These are most of the more known ones. Aquarium Rescue Unit, you know, Government Mule, obviously, Humphreys McGee, Moe, Widespread Panic, Fish. You know, some of the Black Crow stuff is kind of jammy. Some of that early Blues Traveler as well. Chris Robinson's Brotherhood also pretty much in that vein. That early Derek Trucks Band stuff is fantastic. God, all those Derek Trucks Band albums are just ripping stuff. Garage Mahal, very cool, kind of jammy fusion band. And Jam Camp, okay? That's kind of the ones that I've been subjected to. There's just so many of them. So many of them. From Dan Thompson, Pete, really love a lot of the Sea of Tranquility videos. Do you read any of the music magazines out there, like Rock Candy, Fireworks, or Classic Rock? I think this question was also asked last week. I don't really read magazines much anymore. I don't have the time. Okay, between doing all the stuff here on YouTube and the regular website, and you know, reading rock biographies and other books that I like to read. I like, you know, reading Stephen King stuff and sci-fi and fantasy and things like that. I just don't have the time, and quite frankly, magazines are expensive. Shit, I mean, I bought Classic Rock. I like Classic Rock. They do a great job. The Classic Rock and the Prog magazine. Classic Rock put out a Deep Purple kind of retrospective, you know, celebrating 50 years of Deep Purple, magazine that I bought a couple weeks back. And so it's like $20 for a magazine. It's like, fuck, you know? So, yeah, but back in the day, man, I read like Guitar World, Guitar Player, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, Circus, Hit Parader, Cream, you name it, I read it. You know, with the exception of Rolling Stone, which quite frankly has always sucked. I read them all, you know. Plus I read comic books too, so it's like, you know, where am I going to find the time? So anyway, good question. From Charles Haynes. Hey Pete, have you heard the song Toys and Flavors from the Swedish band The Hellacopters? One of my favorite songs of all time. Yeah, great tune, man. Orange Ant Power. Woohoo! That's a band that I really need to investigate. I don't own any Hellacopters. I've heard various songs throughout the years, and I think they're a pretty damn good rock band, or were a pretty damn good rock band, and I never went and bought any of their stuff. I probably should do that. From August West, I reckon I'll regret bringing this up, but here goes. The Grateful Dead. Kind of an either love it or hate it band for many. Love this show and looking forward to your insights, opinions. You know, I like the Dead. And I never got to see them back in the day, but I went to see Further, which was, you know, kind of a later version of the Grateful Dead after Jerry passed away. I saw them like 3 times in concert, and they were great, and I loved the experience. I have most of the Grateful Dead. I think I have all the Grateful Dead studio albums. I have a bunch of live albums and Dick's Picks and all that kind of stuff. You know, there are times where I'm totally in the mood for the Dead. And I think for me, the Grateful Dead is a great band to, and again, this goes back to another question, to go sit out in the summertime by the pool, drinking beers and getting the barbecue going, right? It's nothing better than listening to that kind of music. You know, it's just fun, happy, kind of jammy music. So I like the Dead, okay? Am I a Deadhead? Not by any means, but there are times where I really enjoy listening to them. And by the way, Blues for Allah is my favorite Grateful Dead album, in case you were wondering. From Nick's Texans Fans #1. Hi, Pete. What's one concert that occurred before you were born or were too young to attend concerts that you wish you could have been at? Thanks for always getting to my questions. Another one that was asked on a recent show. I'm just going to name one this time because I named a couple last time. I wish I was old enough to be at Woodstock, the original Woodstock. I was only 3 at the time, and actually that happened. Woodstock is only an hour from where I live, and my parents still remember that weekend when we were, at the time, the house that I grew up in was a summer home for us, so we were up there that weekend, and they remember seeing all the cars heading up the New York State Thruway and Route 17 to get up to Bethel, and then, you know, obviously the traffic was crazy, and people just getting out of there, leaving their cars and walking. So I would have loved to have been there, man, to see The Who and Jimi Hendrix and, you know, the Dead and Mountain and Johnny Winter and Santana and 10 Years After and Ed Jefferson Airplane, on and on and on. I would have loved to have been there. So, and I know a few people who were there, who went, and I'm very envious. I love hearing the stories. From CBH440, do you think our beloved CDs will ever become extinct? The vinyl demise was temporary. I hope the CD demise doesn't happen in my lifetime. You know, I don't see them going away anytime soon. Obviously, you know, a lot of bands who are doing their own, you know, not going to labels and creating their own music and marketing their own music, a lot of them are not producing things on CD. They're just doing, you know, downloads and streams and things like that. But I don't see it going away. There's still plenty of us left buying them out there. So I don't think they're going to. At least I hope they don't, because I got a lot invested in it. From Robert Stacy, favorite Dream Theater album and song. Album, Metropolis 2, Scenes from a Memory. Song, and you know, God, there's so many great ones. But I think for me, In the Name of God from the Train of Thought album. Just really love that song. I love that album quite a bit too. But so many great tunes. You know, so many great ones. Learning to Live was my number 2 choice, in case you're asking. From Manic Scarecrow, did you ever follow professional wrestling? I know that's not a musical question, so I will ask. Also, what genre of metal do you like the least? I actually have followed wrestling almost my entire life. I remember being a kid and watching wrestling with my brother and my great uncle was it Saturday morning, you know, the old World Wrestling Federation. And seeing like Bob Backlund and Bruno Sammartino and the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov and Rick Martel and Polish Power Ivan Putski and the Killer Bees, and then watching it through the 80s with Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man Randy Savage and Bret Hart and Sid Vicious, Ric Flair. In recent years, I don't really watch it much anymore. I don't watch the pay-per-views. I occasionally will tune into Monday Night Raw or SmackDown and watch a little bit. I still follow what's going on. I have a couple websites that I go to that I read up and see what's happening on the wrestling scene all the time, but I don't really watch it much anymore because I was just spending too many hours during the week watching wrestling. But I think right now they're in a pretty good place. There's some really good wrestlers. I mean, you got AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan in the women's division is just doing, you know, Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey and just some great Asuka. There's some really, really talented athletes in wrestling right now in the WWE. I still think that they really dropped the ball. And I think that's what really got me. I was a big Stone Cold Steve Austin fan for a number of years. I think they really dropped the ball in the writing part of it now. It's just like they got these great wrestlers that they don't push. You know, come on, give Samoa Joe a title for crying out loud. But I think the writing's a little lackluster, and I think they just need to run with some of these people. You know, some of these guys are so talented, and they just waste away there. So as far as what genre of metal do I like the least, I'm going to say like metalcore. Man, it just doesn't do anything for me anymore. I was into it for a little bit, but just don't get it anymore. From Warren Zoel, I see a lot of CDs and DVDs in the background. I'm curious, do you collect vinyl? I do not. Like I've mentioned numerous times, I own maybe 15, 20 LPs, if that. I sold them all back in the late 80s, and I just went fully into CD, and I never looked back. At this point, I just can't jump back into LPs. A, I don't own a record player, and B, where am I going to put them? I just don't have the room, and LPs take up 3 times, 10 times the amount of room. So, from Lawrence Terwilliger, hi Pete, what was the first song you learned on electric guitar and why did you choose it? Paranoid by Black Sabbath, just because I was new to playing guitar at the time and I was newly into Black Sabbath at the time, and Paranoid just seemed like an easy tune to play. That's the first song I ever learned how to play from start to finish, including the solo. That's the time. That's where I was at the time. From Jiff882, do you dig Manic Frustration by Trouble? I didn't hear you mention that one. Yeah, I like all the Trouble albums. I just mentioned a couple ones that I really, really like. But no, Manic Frustration is great. Can't go wrong with any of those Trouble albums. From Mark Williams, hey Pete, what's your take on TNT? Ronnie Latico is one of my favorite metal guitarists. Also, Tony Harnell's side band Westworld. I have not heard any Tony Harnell solo stuff or any other band he's had. I love those first couple TNT records. I think, Tony's vocals and Ronnie's guitar playing. And Ronnie is a very original player. Great guitar player. I saw them live a couple times, too, back in the 80s. Woof. I love those first couple albums. It's a good mix of like kind of metal, hard rock, and really like commercial pop almost. Very, very underrated band. It's too bad they never really broke big, From Vince Ostrowski. Dear Pete, what is your favorite various artists CD? The one that I'm really into now is Winds of Time, a 3 CD set of new wave of British heavy metal from 79 to 85. Like I mentioned on the other question, I'm I don't regularly seek out various artists' CDs. I've got way too much else to listen to as it is, and that's just like almost overkill for me. But, you know, in the last year or so, a couple that kind of spring to mind was that Guitar Masters collection that Brian Tarkin put together. That was pretty cool. A lot of really good recordings from a lot of really good guitar players on there, including a couple with Holdsworth. And then AFM Records put out 20 Years of Metal Addiction. And they do that every couple of years. That was really good. So if you're not familiar with the AFM Records roster, that's a great way to get just like an introduction to everything they've got going on there. From James Reid, hi Pete, what do you think about the band Angel? As I mentioned earlier, great band. Get those first 2 albums. I love them, but all their albums are really solid. Another one of those bands. You know, I had a conversation with Rick Rano from Stars a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how Stars and Angel both should have been huge, and it just never really happened. Angel should have been enormous, you know, never really quite did it. GIF882 is back again. Speaking of Southern rock, do you know a band named Mother's Finest? Yeah, I've heard about Mother's Finest forever. I've never really listened to them. I've heard they're pretty unique, kind of like funky soul, Southern rock type of thing, but I've never listened to them. Also, do you like Playing to Win by Outlaws? It was produced by Mutt Lange. Yeah, I have that. That's a pretty good album, pretty solid. Probably one of the Outlaws more, and again, because you got Mutt Lange involved, probably one of more of their more mainstream poppy sounding albums, but still some really good guitar work on there. And I like the production of the guitars on that album. From Brent Stew, how about a shout out to some Saga, list some songs, albums, etc. I actually have on my list to do a Saga top 10 songs because it's been asked for many times, so I will get to it eventually. From Trenton Smallwood, have you heard the Swedish death metal band called Vampire? Yeah, that I've heard their 2017 album, which is what, Primeval Force. I kind of like that album. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Grave, maybe a little bit of Dissection. Pretty cool. Nice little technical death metal. I actually checked out some of their earlier stuff, and I didn't like that as much, but their more recent stuff is pretty polished. From Mike F. Hey, Pete, I am on a big Grand Funk Railroad kick now. My question is, do you think that they kind of burned out because they put out 12 albums, 10 studios, and 2 live albums? And why is the current lineup not put a new album out since 2000? Thank you for your time. Yeah, I mean, Grand Funk was really busy from like 69 through, 76 or so. And maybe they burnt themselves out. I think, too, the musical climate was changing a bit. But their last, the current lineup has never released anything as far as studio album or live albums. The last studio album by Grand Funk Railroad was 1983. That was the What's Funk album. That's the last thing that band has ever released as far as studio. The last official live album that was released was the Bosnia live album in 2002. That actually had Mark Farner included. Why the current lineup has not done anything other than tour, I have no idea. I would love to hear a new studio album, or at least put out a live album or something. But yeah, nothing. As far as why they, maybe they just got burnt out, because those guys toured constantly. And sometimes they release like more than one album a year. So, for that 5, 6, 7 year period, man, Grand Funk were like busy, busy, busy. So, yeah, maybe they just got burnt out. From Gear Lad, hi Pete, what do you think of Jafria, and do you own any of their albums? Also, do you own any House of Lords albums? Which do you prefer the 2 iterations of this band? P.S. I heard that Gene Simmons was involved with the band and thought they should change their name and didn't like David Glenn Isley as a singer and brought in James Christian to replace him. Yeah, I have those 2 Jafria albums. They never released the third. The first one is great. The second one is good, but the first one is really, really good. As far as House of Lords, I like their first 2 a lot. Not that dissimilar from Jafria, although obviously you got a different singer. Little less keyboards than the Jafria stuff, and I think maybe a little harder rocking, but still very commercial sounding. Both bands very, very good. Then I kind of fell out of touch with the House of Lords for many, many years, but since they've been signed to Frontiers Records over the last, 8 years or so, I've heard their last couple albums, and they're very, very solid. Good band. From Lonnie VR, do you ever check out any modern blues guitarists? People like Walter Trout, Coco Montoya, Albert Castiglia, and ladies Samantha Fish and Anna Popovic are also awesome players, and while modern blues may not be your thing per se, I would hope you check out some of their albums. Did you not watch the video, my friend? I named a whole bunch of blues guitarists that I like, including a couple that you have here. Yeah, I like blues stuff. I'm a Bonamassa fan. I like Eric Gales, and I like Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and I love Walter Trout. He's awesome. I've heard a little Anna Popovic. She's very good. Samantha Fish I have not heard. I also like that guy. What is his name? He plays Epiphone Les Pauls. Jared something. I forget his name. He's quite good too. Yeah, a lot of great blues players out there. I like blues guitar. I'm a guitar fan in general. From Odin2112, hey Pete, what do you think of Supertramp? If you like them, would you do a top 10 Supertramp songs? I think we can do that. Put it on my list. And our last one for today, from David Koch. Hey Pete, I just found your YouTube channel. I'm really digging it. Lots of good recommendations. I was just wondering if you like Hawkwind. Man, everybody's asked about Hawkwind. If so, what is your favorite album? Okay, well, I've kind of already answered this a couple times on this show, but Hall of the Mountain Grill or Warrior on the Edge of Time are probably neck and neck with my favorite Hawkwind albums. Last question from David. Do you think Rainbow in the Dark by Dio is a dig at his former band at all? You know what? I kind of doubt it because he had already been out at Rainbow for a number of years at that point, so I can't imagine. I think if he was going to dig at a former band, it would have been at Sabbath because, that wasn't a great parting. After that, during the Live Evil, sessions and after Mob Rules, they did not part on the best of terms. So I think by then he was already over and done with whatever went on with Blackmore. So I don't think Rainbow in the Dark has anything to do with Blackmore and his former band. But that's just my opinion. Don't know for sure. So that's all of them. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So again, if you didn't hear your question being asked, that just means that it's already been asked before and I've already answered it before in a previous show, or maybe the question is just too long and would take up way too much time here. So, hopefully we got to it. If you got questions for the future, for next week, put them in the comments and feedback here, and I'll try to get to them on next week's show. Again, we're starting to see a lot of people repeating questions, so these shows might get shorter and shorter because we're getting a lot of repeats. So make sure you go and spend some time and listen to the previous episodes. This way you can, hopefully you'll hear some of your questions answered before I skip them for this go around if it's already been asked. So and try and keep, if you can, because we want to try and get to everybody, try and keep your questions to a limit of 1 or 2. Some of you are giving me 3, 5, 6 and more questions per week, and it's like, we got to save time for everybody else. Also, I want to mention this too. As you've noticed for a while now, we've got advertising on the channel. So you'd help me out greatly by either, clicking on an ad or watching it for a couple seconds or leaving that little banner at the bottom. Every couple cents helps me here, right? So a little bit of cash coming in is always nice to help keep this going, and I greatly appreciate that. So make sure you visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're on the mighty YouTube. One more thing before I let you go. There is a poll here on the site. Check it out. Just ask a little question about kind of relating to what I put on the book review I did, the KK Downing book review. I asked some questions about what shows. I'm looking to trim the number of shows that I'm doing a little bit because it's just getting to be a little unmanageable. So I may drop one of the shows. So there's a poll asking if I were to drop one of these shows that I have listed there, which one would you least be sad to see go? Let me know honestly. And, we'll think about it. We'll look at the results after about a week, and then, I'll give some consideration to possibly dropping one of the shows because there's just so many of them and I just don't have the time. So anyway, guys, thanks again for watching. www.seatranquility.org. Visit us on Facebook. We got polls going on, live album polls happening every day. We're on Twitter, of course. We're here on the mighty YouTube. We got, what do we got coming up? I got a rant that I'm doing in a couple days. I got a bunch of top 10 songs I want to get to next week. So you might see 5 or 6 or 7 or more top 10 song shows next week, which I'm sure you'd be very excited about. So, and I got a new product show I want to get done because I got a whole stack of CDs I want to show you and talk about. So, all right, we'll see you soon. Bye.